What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. Danielle Smith has had enough. In fact, she's on fire lately as she came out not once but twice today to talk about big changes coming to Alberta. Now, as we talk about Alberta, don't forget this Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Alberta Legislature, the Alberta Independence rally. It's going to be huge. Everybody has to be there. Anybody demanding independence in Alberta, make sure you're there. There's going to be a number of speakers from Chris Scott from the Whistle Stop. You're going to have Keith Wilson speaking, Jeffrey Rath, Dr. Mosry, Mitch Sylvester, all of them standing up to speak. The Fringe will be there speaking and addressing everybody live. Make sure you're at the Alberta Legislature this Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. With that being said, let's talk about what Danielle's doing because, boy, things they are changing. For anybody who has been following Mark Carney's censorship laws, when we talk about digital ID coming to Canada, that it starts with censorship. When you look at C8, C9, it's going to go back and forth in the Senate. Well, Danielle Smith has had enough. She says that this is provincial jurisdiction. Alberta will remain a free speech province. There will be no stepping on the speech of Albertans. Danielle herself posting on social media today. Today I announced Bill 1, the International Agreement Act, to protect provincial jurisdiction and ensure decisions that impact Alberta are made in Alberta. This is where I've told everybody before. If you have the ability to leave your province and move to Alberta, if you want a better life, independence is going to be the only way forward. This says it all. This is why Alberta is standing out from every other province. They're the only province where our premier is actually doing her job, where she's actually invested in people within the province, her constituents. She's now panning for free speech and to make sure other things change. We're going to get to that. Stick with me, folks. Let's hear what Danielle had to say over this 30-second clip, and then we're going to discuss more.
As we return to the legislature, our government is focused on delivering the clear mandate that Albertans gave us to stand up for this province, protect our freedoms, and chart our own path forward. That's why we are taking the next step to defend Alberta's constitutional rights through Bill 1, the International Agreements Act. Ottawa can sign international agreements with other countries. That's their right. But this legislation makes it clear that those agreements will only become enforceable in Alberta if implemented under provincial legislation. Work with us, and we'll get things done. Overstep, and Alberta will stand its ground.
Now, I like the sound of that. I think Danielle, again, is doing a fantastic job. There's nothing better that could have been said other than you overstep your bounds. Alberta's going to dig its heels in the sand. We're not putting up with it. So when it comes to C8, C9, when it comes to the overstepping of the government saying, you're not allowed to build pipelines, you're not allowed to do anything. In fact, we're just going to harbin and stop anything that you're doing. Danielle says that's going to be Alberta's jurisdiction, and we're going to start being a little more clear. Now, it's also about immigration. It's about a lot of other things, and we're going to talk about that as well. Good news on the front of the teacher strike, as Danielle Smith has also announced today, back to work legislation is on order paper as the Lieutenant Governor delivers a throne speech focused on healthcare reforms, sovereignty, and immigration. Danielle Smith is sending the teachers back to work. This will be put through the legislature on Monday. So it could be any time next week the teachers go back, or again the following Monday. I'm not sure how soon they'll order people back. But it's very clear throughout this strike, if you can call it that, that it's all been about politics. It's all been about the NDP. I want to touch down on what's been discussed here by the Alberta Lieutenant Governor, because there's a lot to unpack here. The Alberta government will focus on seeking more active control over the province's immigration, forge ahead with healthcare reforms, and defend its sovereignty, said Lieutenant Governor Salma Lakhani in Thursday's throne speech. From the throne as a provincial teacher strike simmers in the background. The throne speech, marking the beginning of the second session of the 31st legislature, came as teachers entering 3 weeks off the job held a rally on the grounds Thursday afternoon. Finance Minister Nate Horner's Bill 2, the Back to School Act, was on Thursday's order paper. Danielle Smith said unless a deal is reached, the legislation forcing teachers back to work will be introduced on Monday. I am so happy to see this. Now, when everybody talks about the teachers' strike, Danielle has given a more than reasonable offer. They offered as high salaries as $120,000 a year. There's 96 days a year for the teachers. They offered to bring in between new teachers and teachers' aides a total of 4,000 new staff members while building over 100 new schools, and they still turned it down. A 17% raise. How many other people out here who work a full-time job have ever been offered a 17% raise and said, it's not enough? Give me a break. We're looking to end the strike, Horner said. We're definitely far apart on the last offer from the ATA. I think we've never left the table in the sense that if an offer came across the table this weekend, or if they contacted TBEA and asked for formal dates, conversations will be had. But Monday is coming soon. I love this approach, the we're just not going to take it anymore approach. As the legislature resumes, Government House Leader Joseph Chow said the press conference on Monday that the government will introduce a minimum of 15 bills. Here are some of the province's priorities mentioned in the throne speech. Now, keep in mind, the Alberta AGM is coming up in November as well. The Fringe will do his best to make sure he's there, covering the AGM. But it's important they bring these things out so that people understand what's coming their way. Sovereignty and immigration. Over the summer, the Alberta Next panel held town halls across the province and said it will soon make recommendations for initiatives to, quote, strengthen Alberta's sovereignty within Canada. The initiatives then should be put to a referendum of Albertans. They're going on to quote and say, sovereignty does not mean separation. Strength and self-determination do not have to mean national independence, the speech said. In fact, it is your government's view that both Canada and Alberta can only succeed when a proper constitutional balance has been restored and Alberta is empowered to freely pursue its full potential while Ottawa focus its efforts on key areas of federal jurisdiction. It said the province is in active negotiations with the federal government to gain additional pipeline access to international markets. We all know what's happening with David Eby. He's been shutting it down. They want to overhaul several pieces of federal legislation that have, quote, profoundly damaged Alberta's economy for the last decade. We're talking about the job-ending policies put forward by the Trudeau government that essentially crippled Alberta. It goes on to say the province is also looking to get more active control over immigration in the coming months and years, saying Alberta has become concerned with high unemployment, inflation, and growth pressures on the province's social infrastructure. Smith also introduced Bill 1, the International Agreements Act, on Thursday, which draws upon similar Quebec legislation to assert that Alberta would not implement policies stemming from international agreements that fall within provincial jurisdiction without the approval of the legislature. Love seeing that. Provinces generally have this ability under the Constitution, and in Alberta's case also via existing legislation pertaining to the matters of trade and investment. But Smith said it is important to establish a precedent. This just expands it to include all agreements that the federal government might enter into that impact our jurisdiction, she says. Alberta NDP Naheed Nenshit criticized the province's throne speech, saying it did not outline any concrete steps to address the cost of living. What's funny is he hasn't done so either. In fact, he has never once talked about a policy he'd put in place. He just points the finger at Danielle and plays the blame game. He says the overwhelming thing that I heard and that I heard in the speech is that the government does not live in the same Alberta as the rest of us. Albertans are treading water. Cost of living has never been higher. People are struggling to make it at the end of the month. Well, what's funny about that is Nenshi wanted us to spend an additional $2 billion out of taxpayer fees and money to give the teachers a never-never deal in this strike. So which is it, Nenshi? Are you worried about people's affordability or are you worried about your brownie points? When it comes to healthcare, the speech province said that it believes that Canada's healthcare system is broken. It said that with the changes previously made by the Alberta government to dismantle Alberta Health Services into 4 health agencies, the province can further accelerate its intended reforms. The speech said that the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction will soon begin operations for when it's dubbed as the Compassionate Intervention Program, which can mandate treatment for individuals. The Ministry of Assisted Living and Social Services will begin a new initiative to transfer non-acute patients, primarily seniors who have spent hundreds of days living under hospital beds, to other accommodations. It's intended to free up acute hospital beds. Legislation will also be introduced that empowers Albertans with more choices to access private testing and screening. Now, it's funny because Danielle made that announcement, and a lot of people thought, I seen it on social media, people saying, look, Danielle Smith is privatizing healthcare. She's allowing you to prioritize yourself if you're willing to pay. One of the things people didn't mention in that, it was Danielle said, if you get a CAT scan or any kind of screening to prevent things like cancer or heart disease, and they find that there's an actual problem, meaning you're not there just wasting their time, if a problem is found, they reimburse you the costs of paying for that private treatment. I don't see a problem with this. She says, or it's gone on to say, sorry, the outdated model of building massive new multi-billion-dollar hospitals that take half a decade or more to build and then are almost always underused when opened must end, the speech said. It's funny because when we lived in Calgary, before my family and I packed up and moved earlier this year, there was a hospital built in the south that they said it's the largest hospital in Western Canada. And anytime you went in there, wards of the hospital were shut down because they didn't have staff. Who needs that? The province plans to increase chartered surgical centers and said that it will move away from a wasteful, inefficient block funding model for public hospitals to an activity-funded model. When it comes to economy and infrastructure investment, in the speech it mentioned the economic cost of tariffs on Canadian goods and the geopolitical climate, which has significantly depressed the price of oil, resulting in billions of lost royalty revenue on a budget deficit. Albertans are well aware of the effects of both high and low prices of oil and inherently understand there is no need to panic or overreact. This isn't Alberta's first oil price roller coaster, after all, the speech said. And I can side with that. As you know, my wife has worked in oil and gas for over 20 years. There's usually a five-year up, and then it tapers off. It goes down for a few months and then back up again. It is, in its sense, as they've quoted here, a roller coaster. Albertans are used to this. What they're not used to is tyrannical policies that prevent you from going back to work or getting your oil to market. It says the province has launched a review of all programs and grants access across government departments to reduce or eliminate spending that has become unnecessary or redundant, meaning overflow or waste. It committed to growing the Alberta Heritage Trust Fund to more than $250 million by 2050 and committed to diversifying the province's economy. They go on to talk about justice and public safety. Again, Danielle has made it very vocal. She's done with the RCMP. She wants to get her own police force. There's a lot of bills that are coming in right now, folks. I don't want to leave this video going too long, or else people are going to start saying, "Hey, Fringe, you're boring everybody. Let's talk about the good things here." Alberta is putting its foot in the sand when it comes to its jurisdiction. Anybody in this country who's worried about your freedom of speech, your right to express yourself, your right to choose, your right to health care, your right to adequate police force and protection. Alberta has said enough is enough. I would urge anybody across this country that if you've been debating it, if you've been thinking about it, should you move to Alberta, now is the time. I would highly recommend anybody do this. Let me know what your thoughts are on Danielle's speech down below in the comments. Also, let me know if you're going to be at the rally on Saturday. I'm interested how many we're going to see there at the Alberta Independence rally Saturday, again at the legislature from 4 to 6 p.m. in Edmonton. I hope to see you there. Join me live twice a week on the channel, Wednesdays and Friday nights for Unhinged Fringe on Wednesdays, Friday Night Fringe on Fridays, as I'm joined by the beautiful Mrs. Fringe on Fridays as we talk about everything that happened this week in politics, everything we know coming up in the week ahead, as well as Q&A within the greatest YouTube community on the platform. I look forward to chatting with you guys outside of these live streams each and every week. I most importantly look forward to talking with you this week, starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, here on the channel. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.